the same page. Right on cue. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead. On my screen, it says the meeting is being recorded. I just click got it, so now everybody's aware. And now I'm going to go ahead and ask to get the next slide, please, and ask the precinct to say a few words.
Great. Thank you, Zach. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jorge Bustamante, and I am the planning manager with Harris County Precinct 2, Commissioner Garcia's office. I wanted to start by thanking everyone here for joining us tonight. But first, I wanted to hand it over to Gretchen to say a few words from the commissioner about public safety. Gretchen?
Yes, thank you all for being here. I'm excited about this meeting this evening with everyone. But first of all, I just want to relay a message to you on behalf of Commissioner Garcia. He extends his condolences to the families that were injured and to the family of Miss Daisha Allen, who lost her life in the tragic incident on Sunday. He's working closely with the Sheriff's Department, Harris County Sheriff's Department, to they're keeping him apprised of the investigation, and our thoughts and our prayers are with the families. And with that being said, just a reminder that public safety is his top priority in Precinct 2. And it's not just about crime, it's about safety with our parks, our streets, our schools, and in everything we do. He actually had a meeting, it was supposed to be last month, but it was today, for some of his employees that deal, directly with the public. And it was a public safety communications meeting in Precinct 2 today. And he wants his staff to stay informed of the past initiatives and also the current ones that he's brought to Precinct 2 since he's been in office. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gretchen. With that, I want to thank everyone again for coming tonight. And I wanted to emphasize, we're working really hard, switching gears and talking about the community plan now. We're working really hard to have this plan be community-led. So I wanted to make sure, that the task force is our key sounding board for all of these recommendations and all of these items that we're going to present to you. So I would highly encourage you to ask questions, provide comments as much as possible so that the plan really reflects what you would like to see in your community. All right, so with that, I'll hand it over to Manisha to go over the agenda and introductions.
Great, thank you so much, Jorge. So we can just do some quick introductions of the project team. We have folks from the county, if you'd like to introduce yourselves first, and then we'll go ahead to the consultant team and then into our agenda. So Brian, Alberto.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Let me pass it over to Alberto, who's managing this project for the engineering department. Hey, Alberto, can you hear us?
Yes, sorry, got glitched there. Hello?
Yeah,
yes,
can you
we
go
can.
ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, my name is Alberto Ponce. I am part of the planning group, and thank you for seeing everybody here. Glad to be back.
Great, thanks. And then Ismat.
My name is Ismat Bouyan. I'm with Harris County Public Health.
Thank you. And so I'm Manisha Khana from the Goodman Corporation. We are the prime consultant for this effort, and I'm the project manager. And I'm joined with two of my colleagues this evening.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Webb with the Goodman Corporation as well, acting as the project principal, and happy to have the opportunity to speak with everybody again.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Miller, and I'm a planner with the Goodman Corporation, and I will be monitoring the chat this evening. So feel free to leave your questions, and I'll be answering them as we go on.
Great, thank you. And then our meeting is run today by Outreach Strategist, who's also working on this plan with us. And Zach will be leading our conversation. We have Zach and we have Anthony. And I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves. And then Zach, why don't you take it away?
Sure thing. Good evening, everyone. Zach Miller. I'm with Outreach Strategists. We're helping with some of the engagement effort. Running our call this evening is my colleague, Anthony. I apologize for that shift in the screen view there. I think that got it squared away. So that having been said, do we have anyone else on the line, Monisha, that we need to introduce, or do you think we're ready to go ahead and start?
No, I think we're ready to go. Thank you so much to the task force for being here, and we'll get started with our presentation.
Absolutely. So if I can have the next slide. I wanted to start off by thanking everybody who participated in the survey. What you're looking at on your screen right now is what we call a word cloud. And if you've never seen one before, these are kind of interesting. So we had more than 70 folks take the time to participate in the survey. And one of the questions, as you may recall, asked people to sum up their view of McNair and Linus in one word or one phrase. And then we took those words and phrases and kind of ran them through a filter to determine what are the most commonly used adjectives or descriptors that we've got for the area. And as you can see from this, people from Linus and McNair who took the survey think of the area as being very strong. It's very family oriented, it's diverse, it's quiet. These are some of the most commonly used phrases and descriptors that we have. And those are also balanced out by some of the other elements that you see on the screen as well. What this does, though, is this gives us a kind of a clear-eyed view of how the community sees itself. And using a word cloud is one way that we can sort of demonstrate that back to y'all. So if I could have the next slide, please. If we use the word cloud and think about that as kind of the qualitative way to see this data, then what we're looking at right now is more of the quantitative way. So the way that we did this was to ask folks to sort of rank what they considered the greatest strengths and the greatest concerns of the community. So what you told us was that the biggest strengths in Linus and McNair, as you see them, is this sense of community, the fact that it's an affordable place to live, and the fact that it has sort of this really strong tradition of being a community of faith and religious tradition. Now, what you saw as concerns were public safety, and I think that means law enforcement, criminal activity. You saw infrastructure, and you said environmental conditions. So these really aren't the only things that you told us were important, but these are some of the things that you said were the most important. They were the areas of greatest strength and greatest concern. So using those as kind of a guidepost, we can then go in and sort of break them out a little bit more explicitly. So if I could have the next slide, please. What we heard you saying when you told us that public safety was a concern is that you wanted to see an increased law enforcement presence that would equate to crime reduction. You said you wanted greater emergency medical service and fire service as well. So those things together are what we are talking about when we talk more broadly about public safety. We also heard that one of the strengths as it stood was the affordability of housing. And the way that you want us to think about that going forward is to sort of maintain that affordability by renovating or rehabilitating some of the existing housing stock. And you want to use that housing stock to create more opportunities for people to purchase a home in the area. Get the next slide, please. All right, the other thing that you told us is that you kind of want the area to just look better. You want to see less litter, you want to see better lighting, you want to see more green spaces, better sidewalks. You want to have places where there can be outdoor activity. And finally, you also talked in the environmental side about one of your greatest concerns being high water and flood events, and that the way you think that should be approached is through drainage improvements. So drilling down into some of these specifics, we now have a better understanding for where some of those community priorities lie, and we can now start to craft our plan to address them. So let's talk a little bit now about how we're going to translate these priorities into a plan. So if I could have the next slide, please. All right. First thing we got to figure out is, what do we want McNair and Linus to look like? right? What do we have in our heads when we think of McNair and Linus and our wildest aspirations for them, maybe 10 or 20 years into the future? That's what I want you to think about. Get this vision in your head. That vision is where we're trying to get to with this plan, right? This vision is going to tell us what you want to achieve, right? So based on what we heard you say in the surveys, we went ahead and put together a draft statement, and I'm going to share it with you now. So if I could have the next slide, please. All right, here's that statement. The McNair and Linus areas are healthy, safe, and connected communities which provide their residents with an excellent quality of life through equitable access to green spaces, learning institutions, economic opportunities, affordable housing, and a thriving local economy. So, does that sound like the picture that was in your head when I asked you to envision something, right? I want you to remember that we may not capture everything in exactly the order that each individual person wants. But what we're trying to do with this vision statement is pull together kind of a reflection of what we all kind of can agree the community should look like as a result of this plan. So thinking really broadly about this, can I ask you all through the chat feature or through show of hands, what do you all think of this? What's your reaction to this? Did we capture it? Did we get everything? All right, Mr. Edwards says it looks good. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Who else? Don't be shy. All right. We like it. It's great. We'll just take a few more seconds. You'd like to see something about safety. Thank you, Ms. St. Juliet. So here's something that I kind of wanted to mention. When we put together something like a vision statement, we're trying not to drill down too specifically into the weeds and into the details. That's going to come later. But for the vision statement, and I'm really glad you mentioned this one specifically, the McNair and Linus communities are healthy, safe, and connected. So we have the word safe in there because we needed a word that would both speak to the need for crime reduction, but also to emergency medicine, to fire prevention services. So while I fully agree that you are right, that is a major concern, we did use the word safe with that specifically in mind. So that having been said, though.
Does anyone from who's calling in on their phone have any comments or suggestions?
And just as a reminder, if you're on your phone, *6 will mute and unmute yourself.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, then I am going to ask specifically, Ms. St. Julian, did my explanation make sense? Does that satisfy your concern? Okay, all right. Well, then I'm very glad everybody has some approval on the vision statement. So next, now that we know where we want to get to, now that we know what it's going to look like, now we got to talk about our mission statement for this plan. So the mission tells us what the plan is going to do. And here's the way that I think about mission statements. Whenever we have to make a decision about something within the plan, we look back at the mission statement and we say, okay, this decision that we have to make, is it going to improve quality of life through improved infrastructure, mobility, economic development, and public service? Is it coming from the community? And if the answer is yes, great, we go with it. If the answer is no, it really doesn't relate to this mission, well, then we have to set it to the side. So keeping that in mind, that this mission statement kind of is our yardstick for measuring the impact we want to make. Improve quality of life for all residents in the study area through improved infrastructure, mobility options, economic development, and public services through providing recommendations that are based on stakeholder and resident feedback. I keep using the phrase, this is what we heard you say, because we want these to come from y'all. So that having been said, What do we think of this mission statement? Did we capture it? Did we miss something? Do we need to add something? I'll give you all a second to kind of sit with it. Okay. Either everyone is very deep in thought or they're struggling to get their chat feature to work. There we go. I think the last part is essential, keeping the stakeholders at the forefront. Yes, yes, sir, exactly. That is how a good community plan operates. It has to come from y'all, from the people who live there. Oh, okay. So Ms. St. Julie, you think we should possibly reorder? Share a little bit more on that. Do you think that by changing the order, we sort of change the order of priority? Maybe is that why you think it should be reordered? Okay. All right. What would you like to see as the first piece? And maybe it'll help if I tell you in my thinking, oh, accountability. Okay. All right. Adding accountability. So let me ask you, let me dig a little bit deeper. So when we talk about accountability, are we talking about the community being accountable to one another? Whose accountability do you think we need to have in place? And while you think on that, Ms. St. Julian, I wanted to say, in my mind, when we talk about having public services, that includes law enforcement and public safety.
Raise my hand.
Anyone from the phone have any comments? Remember that *6 will mute and unmute yourself if you have anything to add.
Gotcha. Okay, so Ms. St. Julian says that the order of priority that she would like to see is public service, economic development, improved infrastructure, and mobility options. All right. And then, right, parent, educational opportunities. So I believe we actually addressed equitable access to educational opportunities in the mission. And then, Mr. Edwards, could I ask?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That might be easy.
I can talk better than faster than I can type.
Amen. Me too.
Yeah, I think the accountability should be working both ways, actually.
Okay.
I think the residents should be held accountable for keeping the community up like we envision it should, but also the public servants should be held accountability to our vision and mission plan as well.
Okay. All right. I think that gives us some good insight. I think we can take some of this input and actually rework it into some of this draft language. Let me open it up for one more chance to give some input on the plan's mission statement before we move on. Anything else on mission? All right. Is this vision for the planning or is it for the community? So the vision is where we want the community to be, right? The mission is what we want the plan to do. And then the actual plan itself, the real specifics, is how we're going to achieve and arrive at that vision. So the vision is really for the community, but it's going to be what guides the plan. It's kind of a destination, if you think of it that way. Okay. All right. Then I think we can move on. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the goals for this plan. So the goals are kind of the next step down. We started with a real broad topic of where we want to go. We talked about what we want the plan to do. And now we're going to take these goals. And I want you to think of these goals basically like chapters in a book, right? These are the different areas that we're going to be writing real specific plans around. And so these goals are start as follows. So we have preserve, improve, and create quality open spaces, enhance housing options and quality for residents, provide multimodal transportation options and safe access to community destinations for everyone, leverage local, state, regional, and federal partnerships to provide services and funding to the study area, strengthen nuisance and land use control mechanisms. And I'll go back and I do kind of want to mention under leverage local, state, regional, and federal partnerships to provide services and funding to the area. In my mind, that is the area under which law enforcement, public safety would fall.
And also Lee College and other educational institutions as well.
Absolutely. So these are our goals. These are kind of the chapter headings that we're going to have. We'll be writing some more specific plans to each of these. So let me ask again, what do y'all think of this? Do we have it here? Do we need to change, add, subtract anything? Reorder the priority, okay. Well, Ms. St. Julie, take a minute, type up the order of priority that you think would make the most sense. And then others, I'll ask y'all to chime in while Ms. St. Julian tickles the keys. Ah, there we go. That way you don't have to type out the whole thing, just the first word. Smart, Christy, smart. We need to add the district's board of directors input. Okay, Ms. Sandra, I'm not sure which board of directors that's referring to.
They would likely be the water control district is what's being referred to. But if Sandra wants to chime in, she can.
She said Harris County 27.
Is that the water district? Okay. Okay, that is certainly another group that we should probably be querying for some input on some of these items. It's a great thought.
And anyone from the calling in have any comments?
I have one, Zach. My name
Great.
is Selena Osmond.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm listening in, and you started out, public safety was a big one. Then you went to the second session of your mission statement, which you made a comment that think of a yardstick. So when I thought of a yardstick, that's not that long. So you're getting all this material together, and now we're at goals, which you said it's like chapters in a book. So after you come up with this huge list of mission statements and goals, what are you going to start with? Because I hear everyone chiming in on things that should be done, but what's the first one on the list? Because you're getting a whole chapters in a book, but what are you going to start with?
Gotcha. Okay. So I think part of why this is coming up, and I do very much appreciate it, we didn't necessarily order them according to which would be the first area of focus. It was really just to make sure that we captured them all. I think ordering the priority is part of the work that needs to be done. That having been said, though, I'm not really trying to dodge or duck your question, but I think that that's something that we should hear from y'all. Y'all should tell us if these are the things that we need to cover. Which one do y'all want us to cover first? Where do you think we should begin?
The last meeting I was in actually went over pretty much everything that you're going over right now, except it was rephrased as different names, not mission statement, not goals, but safety was one of the main ones that I did hear. Signs, speed bumps from the traffic, from the freeway. Those are some necessities as of the importance of right now. So what can you guys as a group of contractors, consultant engineers, Harris County employees do to put some public signs up? The big 18-wheelers are coming through the community really fast now. What can be done for things like that for right now? What can you do when we get off this phone till the next meeting? You can say we did this and not go over a game plan every meeting and nothing's being done. And if something is being done, by all means, please share.
Tell you what it is.
As far as as what I see, there's nothing being done.
Okay. So let me take a very quick step back. So part of the first task force meeting was for us to kind of hear everything that the people had to say and had to contribute. And then we took that information and we boiled it down to create sort of this outline for the plan. The plan itself is going to contain recommendations. It is hopefully going to be something that can be used to drive funding and to actually drive the creation of some different services and programs to meet these different goals. I know that it's very frustrating to participate in these meetings because it does take a long time. And the whole while you're like, hey, I'm trying to get a speed bump put in. Can we just get to my speed bump? I've been there. I've been on the other side of these planning calls, and it can be very tough. That having been said, the point of the plan isn't to necessarily solve something in the immediate. It's to create a longer term plan so that it's not just focused on getting one set of speed bumps on one street. It's to get together the plan for how we can get speed bumps on all of the necessary streets. And again, I fully understand that may not be an answer that satisfies the frustrations of the moment, but it is the explanation of how this plan is going to help us get there. And I'll be happy to see if my colleagues have anything else to add, but that is the essence of what the plan's meant to do.
Yes, Zach.
I have one question. Zach?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Do you know how many, I live in the McNair area, so I'm going to speak for McNair. Do you know how many streets are in this community?
I have to admit, I do not, ma'am.
There are 13.
Well, 13 is certainly a more manageable number of streets as far as speed bump planning goes.
Exactly. So you wouldn't need speed bumps, but maybe on one or two when it comes to speed bumps. It's like you're building a huge plan for a small area. And I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job. And I'm not frustrated at all because I get a lot done out here on my own in the McNair area.
Yes, ma'am.
But it's like when you got to the goals, you totally lost me with your chapters in a book. But I'll let you go on. Go ahead.
So forgive me for the mixed metaphors. What I was just trying to do is explain that these are the different areas that we're going to try to write the plan specifics around. So I will continue on then, unless Jim, did you have something you wanted to add?
So actually, I was going to say, I think that the question was a great segue into the recommendations of the plan, because that really gets into the meat and potatoes of what we want to do, both in the short term and the long term.
Well, beautiful. Then I'm going to pass the baton to you, Jim, because I believe you have the next section anyway.
Sounds good. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Jim Webb here. I'm going to give most of the front end of this presentation, really focusing on most of the initiatives and programs, which are a component of our recommendations. We're going to have some comment from public health on some of them as well from ISMOT. And then Monisha is going to go into some of the infrastructure recommendations. We don't have any recommendations for speed bumps, but we have lots of recommendations for mobility improvements, roadways, sidewalks, and signage to reduce that truck traffic cut through. So our recommendations are organized kind of in four major areas: economic development and quality of life, parks, recreation, and beautification, housing, and then transportation, mobility, and infrastructure. There's several sub-bullet points here, which you guys can see on the screen. I'm not going to read every one, but the presentation in whole will be on the project website tomorrow morning, so everybody can pull it down and take a closer look at all these materials. Next slide. So one of our first recommendations is to provide fire and EMS services to McNair in a dedicated and long-term and continuous sense. Currently, the McNair community is not providing its own fire EMS services or funding its own fire EMS services. So one of the real needs here is to determine a financial path forward to implement a sustainable plan so that the community does have dedicated protection. We've identified, in coordination with the Harris County Fire Marshal, several options, all of which are workable. We want to be clear here that we don't want to step on the toes of the work that the McNair Community Alliance has put into this process. We understand there's been several planning meetings, and I believe there's others coming up. So this planning effort is really to support and reinforce our efforts. But as we see it, there are three options to fund these services moving forward. Those three options are, first off, for McNair to create its own emergency services district to generate revenue, which could then be used to contract with a service provider. That would ensure control of the community's destiny as relates to that emergency services district and the services being provided. Another option is to join, essentially via annexation, an adjacent ESD. And the third option would be to coordinate with the Fresh Water Control District, who's providing water to the McNair community, to leverage that revenue that's being generated and or additional revenue through assessment to contract with the service provider. And again, these are all just three potential options, but really the ideal option needs to come from the community. What our statement here is these are two critical services that the community needs now and in the future. Next slide. So just in terms of some background on what this really means, what is an emergency services district? It's basically a political subdivision of the state. It's a government agency. It's created by a public vote, public action, and it can generate revenue to provide fire protection and or emergency medical services, i.e. ambulance services, for a particular area. In this case, McNair is going to need to generate funding for both of those services. Generally, ESDs fund their services through property tax. Nobody likes taxes, I understand, myself included, and especially, but we need that taxation to fund the goods and services that we receive. Generally, ESDs are funded by property tax. There can be a sales tax component. They are legislatively capped. So the maximum property tax that can be assessed is 10 cents per $100 of assessed value. The process for creating an ESD it's a process. There's a petition from residents. It requires commissioners court approval. And then there needs to be an election to set the assessment. And then a community board would be identified and appointed to essentially manage the ESD. And that's, again, one reason why if the community decides to create their own ESD, that board can really help make sure or ensure that the community has control of the vision in the long term. Joining an ESD is another possibility. As many of you know, you guys are currently working with an adjacent ESD. That ESD could potentially annex your area, which would allow them to essentially generate revenue through taxation of yourselves to provide their services. That process would require two elections because the area in which the ESD is in currently would need to approve that, and then your area would also need to approve that. Again, the trade-off there is that you'd have potentially a little bit less control over the ESD rather than if it was just dedicated to your area. Next slide, please. So here's sort of a summary of benefits, concerns, and procedure for the three options. Again, those have kind of been summarized previously in the last couple of slides. This is just a handy and helpful matrix to really help put this information out there to the community. I'll note that Harris County's put a lot of work into this through the fire marshal's office. They've got a good report. This table is taken from that report. Again, our effort here is to make sure that this information is synthesized throughout the community to the maximum extent possible, to concur that this is very much a priority that needs to be solved, and encourage that the community to resolve this issue, working with the Community Alliance and others. Next slide, please. So our second recommendation related to economic development is to consider the creation of a management district. A management district is another political subdivision of the state, and they exist all throughout Harris County, and they can do a number of things, but generally what they do is they supplement but not supplant services provided by the city or the county. In this case, obviously you guys are unincorporated, so there's no city here. So this district would supplement or provide additional services over and above what the county provides and it can legally provide currently. Those services are funded by commercial property tax assessments. So if you're a resident, you don't pay into the management district, you're not assessed. However, if you're a commercial property owner, you would be assessed from a property tax perspective. Management districts can also levy a sales tax, which requires an election process. And actually, in the study area, there is some sales tax capacity, which could be leveraged to help fund a management district and some of the goods and services that we're talking about. So specifically, what a management district can do for your community, and this is for McNair and Linus, is to fund and enter into contractual arrangements with private and public law enforcement. So that is going to help improve safety and security. This is something that management districts do all throughout Harris County. A management district can help address ongoing nuisances in the area. So that's like litter abatement, graffiti, trash pickup, code enforcement, things of that nature. And management districts can even, in certain cases, if they decide to, provide and enforce land use standards and incentivize certain types of development. So what that can help do is guide development in a way which is compatible with what the community wants to see, i.e. your vision. So again, this is another special district. There is a process associated with creating it. One of the things that we're looking at currently is drilling in very closely into the amount of revenue that a district in this area could potentially assess. One of those key questions is determining how much sales tax could actually be generated in your area. And you might be saying, well, Jim, there's not a whole lot of commercial development over here generating sales. So, what are you talking about? There's not much revenue. Well, one of the things that the state is able to do now is collect sales tax from online purchases that occur within an area. So what we're doing is we're coordinating with the comptroller's office to identify what is the sales tax that could be generated in this area and how could that be used for the benefit of a management district to help accomplish these goals. One of the other things that we're also looking at is looking at this general area of Eastern Harris County Precinct 2. You've got Linus, you've got McNair, you've got Highlands, you've got Lynchburg. These areas have a lot of the same issues related to nuisance, public safety, security, economic development. Is there potentially some different permutations of a management district which would make sense to generate revenue and meet these needs? What I mean by that is, does it make sense to have a district encompass the geography of McNair and Linus, or Linus and Highlands, or McNair and Lynchburg, or however many permutations of that there are? What we're doing is we're coming up with some options that will help meet the needs, will generate revenue that's feasible, and we'll bring that back to the task force and to the public so that you all can weigh in on what's the ideal path forward. Again, we're only gonna provide recommendations that the community and the public concurs with. Next slide. Okay, increased patrolling services. Again, these are one of those items that the management district could potentially fund. Obviously, additional police presence can help reduce crime and increase the perception of safety. I know that when I see law enforcement come down my street, it makes me feel good. I know I can leave my garage door open, right, and not worry about anything happening. So the thought process is that additional police presence will really help alleviate concerns in the community. We've got two options here, both of which could be funded by a management district. One is to enter into a supplemental neighborhood contract with the Harris County Constable's Office or Sheriff's Office, either or. The other option is to contract with private security companies. There's several within Harris County that do business with management districts. SEAL Security is one. There's no preference or recommendation for that particular group. It's just one that I've seen around the neighborhood, my neighborhood and others. So you could enter into a private security contract to provide those services. There's some trade-offs between the two options in terms of cost and things of that nature, and maybe even perception. But I just wanted to pause now and see if there was a preference or other ideas related to increased safety, security, and getting additional law enforcement on the street related to contracts, private contracts with the constable's office, sheriff's office, or private security. Or should we leave all these options on the table for consideration moving forward? And again, you can go ahead and type your thoughts in the chat box.
Does anyone calling in have any comments? You can use *6 to unmute yourself.
Well, we can keep rolling on, and if folks want to address that now or at the end when we have questions, we can do so. So one question came in, and this is a really great question. Can private security arrest people or not? And the answer is no. So that is one of the trade-offs. So private security enforcement, they can be out there, they can be out in the street, they can deter crime, they can sort of run people off, right? But they cannot arrest people. So if they see a crime in progress, what they're going to have to do is go ahead and call Harris County to actually go out and arrest that individual, directly. So it's more of it's a cost-effective way to deter crime, but not actually enforce it, if that makes sense. I say cost-effective because with the work that we've done, we've identified that in many cases, those private security forces come at a reduced cost over and above those contracts. But again, there's trade-offs to that. And it could be a combination of both. Again, you could have one contract with private security to do certain things, and then a supplemental with constables and sheriff office to do others. And they're not mutually exclusive. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, provide access to healthy food. So this is one with deals a little bit with public health, the livability of the community, and really the quality of life for folks in our study area. And again, just so everybody can see graphically, the study area is depicted with the black outlines on the map here on your screen. So one of the challenges that we've identified is that the study area, there are portions of it that are identified as a food desert, which means that it's a low income area with low access to grocery stores and supermarkets. So portions of Linus actually have that designation when you look at the data. McNair is considered low access to supermarkets, so it's not quite as bad as food desert, but it's still challenged in that area. And just at face value, there are no supermarkets or grocers within the study area itself. There are some that are outside of the study area. So one of the things that we identified to help the community and help provide access to healthy foods, fresh produce, vegetables, meats, things of that nature, would be to working with the county and others to host farmers markets in the area. This could be something that could be worked on with the McNair Community Alliance. Create and host food distribution sites to make sure that folks that are challenged with having access to food or being able to afford food have access to those food distribution locations. And also create and maintain community gardens in the community so that there's sort of a sustaining mechanism for providing access to fruits and vegetables. So next steps for this potential recommendation would be to identify partners in the community that could help jumpstart and maintain these types of recommendations, and partners that could utilize open green spaces. So if there's entities that have larger plots of land for which a community garden could take place, it'd be good to coordinate with those entities. Churches, businesses, Lee College might be one. There's a number of local farmers market programs in Harris County and the Houston region, which we have reached out to talk about their interest in coming out to this area. So next steps would be continuing on that process. There are a number of grants available out there as well that can help basically fund startup costs and operational costs of these programs. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure of is that whoever ends up implementing the farmers market or these programs, make sure that they accept WIC and SNAP benefits so that low-income folks can really benefit from the services that are being provided. Next slide. So I'm going to turn this slide over to Ismat with public health on some community programming opportunities.
Sure, thank you, Jim. So we know that JD Walker is the big community center that hosts events and programming like fitness and after school programs. One of the recommendations that we have is to add additional programming at both the community center as well as the park, including community wellness and nutrition education and financial literacy. So we want to hear from you if there's any additional suggestions and types of programming that you would like to see at the community center. So if we could just take a second and everybody could just type their answer in the chat. If there's any additional classes or programming or events that you would like to see in the park.
Hi, it's Fran with Lee College. It's not at the community center, but I would like to say that we are in discussions about bringing in some programs in the summer for maybe fifth through eighth grade to get them involved in technical programs, to learn about the different programs and be able to get them in dual credit early in high school and be able to move them on through their associates. So that's something that we're looking at starting this summer.
So like a STEM camp for
Right.
kids.
Mhm.
Okay, that's a wonderful suggestion. Thank you. I think Madison, do you have your hand raised?
Madison commented just that there's lots of different types of programs. Madison, are there anything specific or any types of programs that you would be interested in attending if they were offered? You can unmute yourself if you'd like to chat. Okay.
I think so.
And Mr. Edwards asked a question, do after-school programs provide meals for kids? And so I think, Ismat, do you have any information about that?
I don't actually know if they provide meals for kids, but I know that there's a precinct-wide after-school, like kids together program. And I know that JD Walker does host that after schools. I'm not sure exactly what that entails,
Okay.
but we can get back to you on that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So something with personal safety, self-defense. Yeah, those are all really great suggestions. So we'll let the comments just keep rolling. I'll move on, but if there's anyone else that has any additional programs that they would like to suggest, please feel free to do so. The second programming opportunity that we have is, I don't know if many of you know, the Goose Creek ISD has a Safe Routes to School plan that Harris County Public Health helped to create. And so Safe Routes to School is a nationwide initiative that ensures that all kids get to and from school in a safe manner. So one of the elements of a safe to school program is a walk to school day. And so essentially what that is it's an engagement and educational opportunity for kids and students as well as teachers to meet at a designated location and walk to school together. And so we involve crossing guards, and then we involve the parents. And these types of events draw out a lot of different community members because we can offer like bike raffles or prizes for children. And so one of the suggestions is to host and get with the Harlem Elementary School and host a walk to school day. That's all I had. I'm going to turn it back over to Jim and the Goodman Corporation to continue the presentation, but please feel free to drop in more comments on additional programming you'd like to see.
Thanks, Ismat. I appreciate it.
If I could jump in for a second, I just wanted to chime in and mention there is quite a bit of existing programming as well. If everyone would like to visit our website, hcp2.com, we have our civic rec system where you can scroll down to your specific community center and find out all the events and programming that's ongoing. So hcp2.com, I'll put it in the chat. Okay, Christy, thank you for putting it in the chat.
Thanks, Jorge. Appreciate it. So one of the other recommendations we had was to help leverage and enhance the community culture and identity of Linus. You know, McNair's really fortunate. You guys have the Community Alliance, which has stood itself up and is out there talking about issues, proactively working to solve them, helping really create a sense of place in the community. You know, unfortunately, Linus doesn't have that sort of assembled, organized group. You know, we understand there's been a lot of conversation off and on about things like that. But we really think it would be helpful if Linus could, you know, stand up an organization, a civic or community group, in a sense, almost like a neighborhood association, to just foster dialogue, proactively address these problems as they come up, discuss solutions, and advocate for needs. And that advocacy could be directed in a number of different locations. It can help consolidate conversation and maybe sort of laser focus conversation with Harris County and different departments within Harris County, and then also help synthesize conversations with other elected officials, whether it be state representation or federal representation. So this is just a recommendation to help empower the citizenry in this area and help really consolidate and organize some of the discussion and dialogue, which we know is happening now and will likely continue in the future and continue to grow. Next slide. Housing workshops. So one of the other challenges that we've noted in the community within the study area is that there are, especially in McNair, there's a high rate of home ownership. However, we've noticed that a lot of the homeowners in the McNair area are elderly and could benefit from understanding some of the resources and tools and mechanisms in place to help facilitate their sustainability in the community. I think one of the comments we heard at our first meeting was, the threat of property taxes over time and how that was restricting abilities or was perceived as a threat to homeowners and their ability to stay within the community. So some of the things that we've thought about would be to help educate the community proactively on the exemptions that are available, seniors exemptions, veterans exemptions. There was a new one that just got passed through the last state legislative session. And I should clarify, these exemptions help limit and lock in the amount of property taxes that homeowners pay. There's seniors exemption, homestead exemption, and others. And, unfortunately, these aren't things that the appraisal district just gives to an individual. You have to be aware they exist. You have to go out and you have to fill out the paperwork, complete the forms, do it correctly, and submit it. So we think that there's value in partnering with banks and other community organizations to help provide workshops and programs to help educate the community on those exemptions. The other thing that we wanted to prioritize educating the community on was leveraging the equity in their home. Many of the folks in the study areas have owned their home for a long time. Leveraging that equity through a loan or a second mortgage or something like that to help improve their structure, to help them age in place in their home so that individuals make their homes safe in the long run. So that could be things like converting stairs to ramps, making your restroom safe with grab bars and things like that. Other improvements in your home would also include flipping your doorknobs over from your traditional circular knob to more of a lever. So as you get older and you get sort of arthritic in your hands, they're more easy to navigate. Things like that to just help make your homestead more compatible for you to be there for the rest of your life. The other thing that the discussion on leveraging equity could help folks understand is also just how to use equity in their homes to rehabilitate their homes. So if you need water heater, roofing, whatever it is, slab repair, et cetera, help folks understand that if you've been in your home for a long time, there's value there that you can take out and help rehabilitate and revitalize the dwelling you're living in. So this is really education component. Next slide. Incentivizing new construction. So there are vacant lots in both communities, but particularly a lot of vacant property in Linus. Linus also has a high percentage of renters, many of whom are considered rent burdened. That means that they pay a disproportionately high amount of their income on their rent, limiting their ability to spend their money on other things, whether it be food or goods or services or education or whatever it is. So one of the challenges, obviously, that we're facing all over the region, this is not specific to McNair and Linus or frankly, even Harris County, is the lack of housing options and ability to own a home for under $150,000. It's just very challenging right now, the way the new construction costs are rising, engineering costs are rising, and everything else. So one of the things that we wanted to begin to look at is all of the attractive, affordable, and aesthetically pleasing new construction options, looking at manufactured homes, modular homes, homes which are pretty similar to ADUs or accessory dwelling units. You can basically get something that's in a sense almost mass produced now, that's very comfortable, very nice, well built at a reasonable cost. And the nice thing about this option is that it's not just restricting folks to rental options moving forward. Housing stock like this will enable the community to purchase some property, purchase a piece of dirt, and have a stake in that community for the long term, and then also pass that asset down to future generations. So this is a type of housing stock that we think the community should consider moving forward as part of their long-term land use planning. Next slide. So land banking and land trusts. So one of the other things that came up at our last meeting were all of the lots and parcels being purchased by either LLCs or sort of real estate interests and things of that nature, and kind of carving up the landscape, so to speak, and doing things sort of piecemeal, and maybe creating property types and property uses that were not compatible with the vision of the community. So there's a mechanism out there called a land trust, which would allow for either the community or through partnership with Harris County, purchase and preserve those parcels for certain uses. So that could essentially help protect the land use within the area and set it aside for certain housing types or certain types of development. There's a newer, I should say, organization called the Harris County Community Land Trust that is working throughout Harris County to do this, to acquire parcels in areas and setting them aside for affordable housing. So this is an area that the community can work with Harris County on moving forward. And it's also an opportunity that entities like maybe the McNair Community Alliance or some of the ministerial institutions in the community could also work on similar endeavors as well. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over now to Monisha, and she will cover more of the kind of the nuts and bolts elements of the plan, focus on drainage and mobility and general infrastructure. Monisha?
Great. Thank you, Jim. Thanks, everyone, for being here. So in terms of drainage, we heard from you guys about the flooding issues in the community, and we wanted to let you guys know that Harris County Flood Control District has commissioned a study for the Goose Creek watershed. It's finished. It's available online if you'd like to access it. We reviewed the report, and we believe that implementing this plan will alleviate the issues that are faced in the study area. And the recommendations that that plan has are phased in 3 distinct ways. So phase 1 would improve 2 segments along Goose Creek, one south of I-10 and east of Linus, and another closer to SH-146 and 330, and add a stormwater basin. So that would be the second pink circle that you see on your screen. Phase 2 would improve a segment of Goose Creek north of I-10, just up here. And it would also add another drainage basin. This is the north pink circle for those of you who are able to view the screen. So that would be just east of Linus. And then phase 3 would be 2 improvements along 0117 and 0126, which are 2 ditches in or close to McNair. And so for the benefits of the improvements to be realized in the study area, all 3 phases need to be implemented. However, right now there's only available funding for phase 1. So our recommendation from this plan is that the whole plan is funded and implemented, and we recommend that the county find funding for all of it. Okay, next slide. So this next recommendation is to add signage for monuments and wayfinding in the study area. So
can I interrupt for a sec? Interject.
Yeah.
I just want to mention that there's a Mr. James Freddy who is listening by phone, and he was struggling to unmute to comment, but
okay.
he just wanted me to share the comment that one of his main concerns is the drainage in the Goose Creek stream. So I just wanted to mention his concern.
Okay, great. Thank
So
you.
I sent him the screen. So anyway, did you acknowledge Mr. Freddy? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Gretchen. Thank you, Mr. Freddy. We appreciate your concern. And do we have anyone from flood control on here this evening? If not, at the public meeting, they'll be able to answer some more questions. Mr. Edwards, yes, what's the timeline for these projects? I believe flood control will be able to answer that, but phases 2 and 3 do not have funding yet. So if there's no funding, there's probably no specific timeline yet, but we can defer our questions to flood control about that. So are there any other concerns about flooding? If not, then we can continue on to the signage. If there's anything else, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll be happy to address those once we get through the rest of the slides. So in terms of signage, so I was saying that monument signage would indicate that folks are entering the study area, which would help brand McNair and Linus into a community and feed into that sense of identity. Wayfinding signage is signage that would direct folks to certain destination in the study area, sort of places like J.D. Walker and Harlem Elementary. And we can add some of these wayfinding signage in conjunction with some of the mobility projects that we'll talk about later in this presentation. And that would also tie into ISMA and the public health recommendation to host programming with walking to school. So next slide, please. So one thing that we wanted to also address is signage. And, we've heard your comments about trucks coming through the community, people speeding, and adding better signage would be one way to counter some of these issues that your community faces, particularly at these key entrances to McNair and to Linus off of the interstate. And some of the roads that we think would be candidates have been identified on this map, but we would love to hear your input about where you think that you need signs. But one thing that we would like to note is that only enforceable signs can be placed. So something like a speed limit would be enforceable, but a sign like, drive like your kids live here, that's not really necessarily enforceable. And these signs also have to go through a review by the county. So in order to get these signs, residents need to express their concern, which we can do through this plan. It'll be reviewed by the Precinct 2 staff. And then from there, it'll go to the engineering department's traffic department, who will review, they'll perform any necessary traffic studies. If they concur with the need for the sign, then it will go to Commissioner's Court for procurement and installation. And so to speed up this process, we can submit these requests in bulk through this county and get this process started. And like I said, we'd love to hear from you. So please put in the chat where you would like to see signs. And I'd also like to invite Jorge at this point to talk a little bit about speed bumps, because I think that's something that Ms. Ozzie, you brought up and that we've heard at the first meeting as well, is people bringing up the idea of speed bumps. So Jorge, would you like to comment on that?
Sure, thank you, Manisha. I just wanted to touch base with Mr. Edwards. He added another comment in the chat. We can check back in with flow control about the phasing and the timeline. We didn't have it here on the slide, but we know drainage is important and it's a priority. So we'll circle back to get a little bit more detail. As you know, funding is a challenge for flow control all across the county. But we can check in with them and have more data moving forward. Yes, I think in terms of both signage and speed bumps, the county is subject to the Texas Manual on Traffic Control Devices, the TMUTCD. And so it's something that our county engineering department evaluates and makes a determination. And so in terms of signs, like it's shown here, there's a study that's done to make sure that these signs are enforceable and meet that criteria. In terms of speed bumps, it's a tool that the county does not currently use. I think it's something that would require a larger conversation about, traffic calming and what kind of tools the county's policy is able to use. It's something that we're investigating now, but as of right now, the county's policy is that that they don't install speed bumps. But I completely relate to the concern about speeding, and it's something that we can again relay to our traffic department and see what we can do.
Great, thank you for addressing that. Okay, so if you think of places that you would like signage, please feel free to drop that in the chat. But in the meantime, we'll go, excuse me, to the next slide. So park improvements. So the Edna May Washington Park is a great community resource. There was a recently completed Parks and Trails plan done by Precinct 2, which indicated that there are opportunities for improvement for this park. And so some things that our project team noticed, that there's a lack of ADA accessible paths to certain amenities. We heard from folks that there's also a need for additional sports fields. Right now, the bathroom access at the park is just a porta potty. So one potential improvement would be to add actual bathrooms that can be accessed by the public. As you can see, for those of you who can view the screen in that second photo, it would be a building. We have other ideas as well, like drinking fountains, additional lighting, additional fitness equipment, but we would also love to hear from you about what you think the park needs. So feel free to put that in the chat, or if anyone would like to weigh in, if there's anyone on the phone or anyone who'd like to speak up.
One thing I just like to add, Manish, additional public sports fields, finding a way to incorporate additions within the park of that nature.
Okay. If you think of something that you would love to see in the park, please put it in the chat, or we can talk about it once we get through the slides.
Hello?
So, yeah.
My name is Terry Alfred, and I want to know, how do Highlands have a baseball field at a Harris County park?
I'm not familiar with that particular park. Jorge or Gretchen, would you like to weigh in?
Are you referring to Highlands, maybe Little League having use of the existing baseball field at Edna May Washington Park?
Yes, the usage and also their name on the scoreboard. And also they have special parking spaces that no one can use at a certain time.
Mr. Alfred, I'm not as familiar with the park you're mentioning, but I'm happy to follow up with you and loop in our parks team and get a little bit more detail on what you're saying, and we can visit on site and see what we can do about it.
So Jorge, it's this park actually, and I think the field here is sort of reserved for that Highlands use, and trying to understand how that occurred, why that's the way it is, and that also relates to the recommendation that we had, was to set aside a public sports field within this facility that wasn't reserved or dedicated to one particular little league or something like that.
It's my understanding, and I think Anthony's on the call, but and it has something to do with they lease that field, and so there's some type of an agreement between maybe the Highlands Sports Association and the Little League for that particular field. But we'll definitely look into it. I mean, I will, with you, Jorge, we'll give you an answer, Terry.
And I saw Mr. Neal, I saw your comment. It would be good to have a football field. Thank you for that comment. We'll definitely look into that. All right, I guess we can move to the next slide since we're running a little bit low on time. So, while there's the Edna May Washington Park in McNair, there are no parks in Linus. And in the general sub-regional area of the adjacent communities in Eastern Harris County, there's a lack of a greenbelt type amenity. So what a greenbelt would do is it would leverage Goose Creek and provide a 10-foot shared use trail alongside of it, which can be used by both pedestrians and by bicyclists. And this Goose Creek greenbelt could have amenities such as disc golf, seating, parks, and it would also provide connectivity to neighborhoods and areas throughout the study area, including Afton Place and Harlem Elementary. And there's another community plan going on right now next door in Highlands and Lynchburg. And so, we've been talking with that team about how this could eventually tie into a much larger regional project. So eventually this greenbelt could connect up to the Highlands Reservoir, as well as the civic core of Highlands. And one way to make this happen would be through a transportation reinvestment zone, which is something that could be led by the county. So next slide, please. So next up, we have all of our mobility projects, and we've heard the need from you about need for additional access and connectivity in the study area. So I'm just going to go through these briefly, and I'm happy to answer any questions or provide more detail. And for those of you who can see the map on the screen, the projects that are dashed are pedestrian improvements. The ones that are solid lines are roadway projects with pedestrian improvements, and then the circles are intersection improvements. So project number 1 is along Thompson Road, and this would add a sidewalk along the east side of the roadway, as well as streetlights and ADA ramps and crosswalks. And eventually, this could provide a connection from State Highway 330 up to Ellis School Road. And it could be phased so that the first phase is just the section north of I-10, and then eventually do the rest of the project. Project number 2 is along Ellis School Road. And so this project would add a 10-foot sidewalk on the north side of Ellis School Road, along with streetlights, ADA ramps, crosswalks, and some ditch improvements. And this project is needed because there were 2 severe pedestrian crashes over the last 6 years. And this would connect from the subdivision outside of the study area on the west side of Thompson Road over to Harrison Street. Project number 3 is a McNair neighborhood sidewalk loop. This would add a sidewalk along a variety of roads in the McNair area. Again, this would also have streetlights, crosswalks, so on and so forth. And
hey, you got me?
We see.
I was on a conference call with myself. I'm at home. I was just on.
Great, thank you. And so we see this in 2 phases. The phase 1 improvements would be Harrison Street, Harris Street, Harlem Street, and Broad Street. And sort of this area that would connect from Ellis School Road up to Wade. And then the second would be a phase 2. Project 4 is the Greenbelt. We just talked about this, but on this map, you can see how this would potentially tie into some of the other pedestrian access projects proposed in the study area. Project 5, we'll actually talk about in detail in the next slide. Project 6 is pedestrian access along the 0117 ditch. So this would go from Kings Drive over to Goose Creek and tie into the Greenbelt. This would be done in conjunction with phase 3 of the flood controls improvements from the drainage study. So, given that there isn't yet funding for that phase, this would be considered more of a longer term project. Project 7 is along Morelos Road. It would be a reconstruction. And one complaint that we've heard from the Linus community and from you guys is the general lack of access and issues with the trains blocking access into and out of the community. So extending Morelos Road and also paving it would create a new connection for Linus. So we see this alignment to be a 2-lane roadway with one 11-foot lane in each direction, as well as sidewalks on both sides for pedestrian access. And there'd also need to be a bridge over Goose Creek, which would have to be coordinated with flood control. Project 8 is Wade Road crossing. There's 2 intersections where there's railroad crossings, one at West Cedar Bayou Lynchburg and one at Riddell. And both of these would increase the capacity of those intersections through adding turn lanes and widening the road. Project 9 is pedestrian connections in Linus. So this would add a trail from Goose Creek behind Afton Place and then connect to Wade Road. It would also add sidewalks and lighting to Juarez and Johnson, where there are bus stops for the school. So I know I just went through a lot, but again, we can answer any questions later on, or please put them in the chat. So next slide, please. So one project we'd like to talk to you and get your opinion about in particular is this access to Harlem Elementary. So we've heard that there's a lack of pedestrian and roadway access. Wade Road serves as a barrier. So we want to know, in your opinion, what is the best way to provide access for students to the school so that, the frontage road doesn't back up and kids can actually safely walk to school? So we provide you with 3 options. The first option would be only a trail, a 10-foot shared use path, the entire way from Wade to Goose Creek, and there'd be no roadway improvements with this. And that's indicated in pink on the slide. Option 2, which is indicated in blue, would be a roadway to Camino Real with sidewalks. And from Camino Real to Goose Creek, it would be only a path for pedestrian access. And option 3 would be a full roadway and sidewalk access all the way from Wade to both Harlem Elementary and Lee College's McNair Center. So the roadway would cut through the back to access both of the schools. And the last little section on the east side, where the number 1 is on the slide, that would still be a trail, and that would allow for connections from that road over to the Goose Creek Greenbelt. So please cast your vote in the chat and let us know which you prefer. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer that. If you're on the phone and you'd like to weigh in, please go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know what you think.
We have 1 vote for 3, option 3 so far.
Great. So Mr. Neal, when you say trail, that would be option 1. You want to trail the whole way through. So we have 1 vote for each so far. Okay, thank you for clarifying, Mr. Neal.
So I can chime in as well. Something to think about is that maybe these options are not sort of mutually exclusive. Maybe we can build upon it. You know, each option has its own cost associated with it and sort of a time horizon, right? And so it's a lot, we can do a trail maybe a lot shorter term, and then a full roadway can come sort of in the longer term option.
Okay, great.
Hey, Manisha, regarding Amber left a comment regarding the visibility of children with option 3, which I would presume is related to lighting. That option would be inclusive of street lighting, would it not?
Yes, all of the options would have lighting. So Amber, do you want to clarify your comment? Is it lighting, or is it, the long roadway perhaps that students would have to walk on?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any fences along that way, but I guess even with the street lighting, if children are walking, there's no visibility from anybody in the neighborhood to see those kids. So if something was to happen.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you for that opinion, for that concern. All right. Well, thank you. If anyone thinks of anything else, please feel free to weigh in. I know we're running up around 7:30, so I have 1 more slide, and we'd love to open it up for general discussion and questions. So next slide, please. Great. So last slide. So just talk briefly about transit improvements. There are transit stops in the study area that are lacking amenities. There are a sign alongside the road, as shown in this photo here. So this slide also provides an example of an upgraded Harris County transit stop. Shows a landing pad, shelter, a bench. We're also working with Fran and her group over at Lee College to figure out how to improve some transportation options. We heard that, some of the late night classes end after the Harris County Transit service hours. So we want to make sure that folks in these communities are able to access all the resources at Lee College's McNair Center and take advantage of that and not have transportation be a barrier. So next slide, please. All right, well, that's it for our recommendations. Thank you guys all for your attention. I know there's a lot of content. We'd just like to remind you about our project website, www.mcnairlinusplan.com. As Jim had mentioned, these slides will be posted tomorrow. So if you'd like to review these and submit a comment or question on the website, we can respond to you. Gretchen and Jorge's contact information is on the slide here as well. So feel free to reach out to them. In the meantime, please use the chat function to submit your questions, or if somebody would like to raise your hand via Zoom or turn on your camera and wave hello, we'll call on you, and we'd love to hear what you have to say.
So we do have some questions on the chat regarding cameras on near the Harlem Elementary access option. So several people think that maybe cameras would be a safe addition. So is there, can we talk to that a little bit, or if those are planned, or what our thoughts are for that?
Yeah, we didn't specifically identify any security cameras as a component of these projects. I think that the challenge with cameras is just identifying who's going to monitor those cameras. So if these are going to be items that could be, functionally related to the school or the community college property, maybe there's a partnership that could be struck there. On the flip side, we could also have a conversation with the constable's office and the sheriff's office and see if there's any ability for them to hook up into a system. I do know that, again, kind of going back to the management district recommendation, there are several management districts that, through their contracts with Harris County constables or other law enforcement, do have their own cameras with monitoring systems set up, which again doesn't necessarily allow for someone to on the spot enforce a crime, but it does record what's going on and help enforce things and just after the fact and keep another eye on issues. It's something we'll definitely look into following this meeting. Are there any other thoughts or questions or comments?
Sherman Gray, I'd like to make a comment.
Go for it.
I just want to piggyback on your statement about cameras. I think that when you look at the proximity of the cameras to the school and that it's dealing with our children, I think it's something that we definitely need to look in and into implementing, because we live right off of one of the busiest corridors in the nation, Interstate 10, and we are in that range of sex trafficking hub. And while it can't immediately stop a crime, it can aid and be the difference in finding a child safely and finding a child unsafely. God forbid something like that should happen. And secondly, I know that it's been mentioned by Justin Neal already, and I just want to reiterate that one of the things that is important for our community is giving our young people and the youth something to do. And one of the things that's big in our community now is our youth football team. And I'd like to see them have some facilities that, they could feel good about, that we could feel good about, something that can last for a long time. And I'd like to explore the option of perhaps making the fields turf, because it does lower maintenance and it's something that can last and maintain a good look.
Great. I appreciate that feedback. So on the football facilities, where are they currently practicing and playing? And would you propose for those new facilities to be at Edna May Washington?
So they're currently practicing and playing at J.D. Walker Community Center. Okay. And the field that they're playing on is a makeshift field that the coaches and other community members got together and made themselves. We're grateful that the county said, hey, yeah, come have it. But, there's one part of the end zone where it's 2 feet from the sidewalk. There's two more fields there, maybe 3. I'm trying to get my bearings right on the field. But one of them, I don't know if they own it or what the case, but one of them is under lock and key by the Highlands Sports Association, and the other one is just minimally kept, meaning that the grass is cut. So I don't know if that field in the front could be something that we could look at, because I'd like to see our boys have somewhere that they can go, and then the fans have somewhere where they can sit and feel safe and good about watching their sons, grandsons, nephews, and nieces play and cheer.
For sure. And just to clarify, is this like Pee Wee football? I guess this isn't associated with a particular school, right?
No, it's not associated with a particular school. This is a youth football league.
Okay, great.
And I guess just to add on to that, again, just having somewhere for fans or even parents to sit during practice or during the games will be beneficial, because people do utilize the park to actually go walk and exercise and or run. And because these parents don't have anywhere to sit, you find them sitting on the sidewalks where people are trying to walk either to avoid sitting in wet grass or in grass that hasn't been cut. So again, particularly having somewhere for fans to sit would be extremely beneficial.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I'll say one more thing too. When you look at the backfield to the right, I think it was used as a rodeo cage, but I mean, at this point, I don't think anyone's been using it at all for over 10 years or so.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just looking at that on the aerial map, and I had the same question kind of in my head, trying to understand the utilization of that area, because that might be a perfect area for a more permanent turf field or something. So yeah, that's something we could definitely look at through our detailed recommendation process. Justin, you also had a comment in the chat with more conversation on economic incentive for developing housing or commercial in the community. You want to clarify maybe what you just want me to kind of touch on that again, or is there a specific question?
Yeah, I can speak a little more on it. So I know there's an incentive for, let's say over in like the Decker area, like over near West Texas Avenue and so forth, to where, the state is matching funds. So let's say if you, like they'll recoup, let's say 50 to 40% of your investment. Like, let's say if you, make a housing development or you make a restaurant or something of that nature, is there any kind of funds available in our community that could, could incentivize people to put some money towards like real estate or towards commercial development?
Understood. Yeah, so that's definitely a component of what we're looking at, and that's related to a couple of the recommendations. It's related to the management district concept. Monisha referenced a concept called a transportation reinvestment zone, or TRIZ. That's another economic development vehicle that can help accomplish what you're talking about. And then Harris County itself can also enter into development agreements to incentivize certain types of development. So basically, incentivization to encourage development patterns that the community wants to see is sort of an overarching recommendation that we have. What we wanted to do here is ensure that we got the vision for the community right, and it sounds like we did. And what we'll be sketching out here as part of our detailed recommendations is sort of a conceptual future land use map for this area. So folks can kind of understand, okay, here's a corridor that may be ripe for commercial development. Here's where residential development could occur. And that could be sort of a framework for incentivizing certain land uses in the future. The other thing too, that would relate back to the residential development that we talked about, making sure that there's quality, affordable, permanent residential uses in the community, identifying where those could go and kind of connecting those development types with incentive packages and programs would help realize that vision in the future.
It sounds good. Thanks.
Awesome. So it is 7:30, and that is what time we said we would wrap this up. But before I do, let me just give one last call out. Is there anything else anybody would like to touch on or make a comment about?
Jim, it's Fran with Lee College again. This year was the first year that we did a trunk or treat, trying to get the community more involved. It was a huge success. So we are certainly open to people making suggestions on other things that we could do to bring students to the school and also, have fun for the neighborhood, like the trunk or treat. We had several hundred from the neighborhoods around that came. So thank you to the ones that brought them, and let's do some more things together.
Awesome. Absolutely. I'm really happy to hear that. It's stuff like that, the sort of active programming, that's very much in alignment with the things that we're talking about and thinking about here. So I really appreciate that. Okay. So everybody, thanks for your participation and input. Again, the presentation, the PDF version will be on the website tomorrow morning. As you're flipping through this, if you're like, hey, there's a specific comment I want to make, but I forgot to make it, or I didn't realize this was in here, or I want to reinforce something I already said, go ahead and leave it in the comment box, or you can email Jorge and Gretchen as well and reach out and let them know. But the intention is to incorporate all this stuff, flesh out these recommendations and make sure that we're in alignment with the task force in advance of going out to a public meeting, and also the task force one last time to make sure that we're good to go. And then these recommendations can be implemented, ideally through a combination of Harris County Precinct 2 and the community.
Great. And just to follow up with that, we're planning to have a public meeting in early 2022. So, once that's set, we will definitely distribute that out to the task force, and we really encourage you guys to get your neighbors and friends involved, and we'd love to hear their opinions as well. So Gretchen, do you have anything to close out the meeting?
I just want to say thank you for everyone that attended, and the input was incredible. I'm hoping and praying we're just spot on with everything that the community wants, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next meeting, public meeting, and Merry Christmas.
And Happy New Year.
And
Good night, everybody.
Feliz Navidad.
Happy holidays. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.